Hello, everybody. How are we? So good to see everybody.
Hi,
Hello,
Chandler.
Lynn. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. All right, everybody. My name is Chandler. I'm a nutrition educator, registered dietitian here at Pendulum. We're so excited to have you. Jen here is another fellow dietitian with Pendulum, and she's going to help me out by answering some questions today. We also have our fabulous customer care team who's going to be in the chat, and they're going to be answering some questions as well. I think we're going to have a lot of folks joining us today, so they're going to be helping us out. So feel free to pop those questions in the chat as we go. I've got a presentation to kind of kick us off and get us started. And kind of be thinking of those questions as we go. We'll answer a few maybe throughout the presentation, but primarily we'll be getting to all of those at the end. So keep them coming. We're so excited you're here. We're so excited to get started. So with that, let's go ahead. All righty. So today you've joined us to hear all about the microbiome. I think we've got some fellow customers in there that are probably ready to help me out and well versed in all of this. So we're so excited to share the knowledge. All right. And again, my name is Chandler. Okay, so kind of just to go over what are we going to talk about in today's session? What's this all about? First, we're going to start out by going through Pendulum glucose control. So that is one of our 3 products here at Pendulum. We're growing quickly, so we've got 2 more added to the team, but we're going to go over Pendulum glucose control today. What it's all about, how it's working in our body, why it is so important and so fabulous. And then with that, kind of getting into microbiome nutrition. So you'll see today that they really, really do go hand in hand. So it's so important that when we're taking any of our 3 Pendulum products, that we're really focusing on our nutrition as well, just to make sure that we're optimizing the products, making sure we're getting the most out of them that we can, and in turn, just building up our body for a healthy microbiome. So we'll see how nutrition plays a huge role in that today. In saying that, I want to make sure that everybody leaves here today really feeling comfortable with fiber. So that's going to be the nutrient of choice today. You're going to hear me say it over and over. And again, a lot of our customers already listening probably have a good idea of this, but I'd love for everybody to feel really comfortable with kind of knowing some recommendations for fiber and why that is going to be so important when you're taking Pendulum products. And then finally, in order to know how much fiber we are having, we got to make sure that we understand label reading. So I know that has changed a lot over the years. It can be very, very deceiving. There's just so many different ways of looking at it and misconceptions. So kind of getting behind that and really understanding what we need to be looking out for on those labels. All right. And hello as everyone joins. We're so excited to have you today. Okay. So, what is pendulum glucose control? It is a symbiotic. And so, what that means is it's a combined pre and probiotic. So, it's going to enhance the growth of beneficial bacteria in our body. Okay. So, pendulum glucose control specifically contains 5 of these beneficial strains that are either found to be completely missing or lacking functionality in people with type 2 diabetes. So a lot of customers will ask you, well, if I don't have diabetes, like, can I still be taking this product? Absolutely. We've got customers from a variety of different health backgrounds that take our products, myself included. So don't let that fool you. This is for anybody and everybody really looking to optimize their microbiome and really get that diversity with 5 different strains. So we'll talk about here in a little bit what those strains are really doing in the body, but know that these are very, very specific, unique, and targeted strains that, like I said, are either completely missing, lacking functionality, and people with type 2 diabetes. So, a lot of times people will say, too, well, why can't I just grab the probiotic at Kroger or Walmart or any of those that are easy for me to just pick up at the store? So, these are very, very unique strains that are not always present in these situations. And so it's not something that you're going to just be able to pick up at the store and have the same benefits. And so our product is also backed by a clinical trial. So we had 76 participants who did have type 2 diabetes, were previously diagnosed, and we found that this was able to help manage those A1C levels and blood sugar spikes. So after 90 days of these participants taking the Pendulum glucose control product, we found that on average, A1Cs decreased by 0.6% after that 90-day period or 3 months, as well as postprandial, which is after meal glucose spikes, by 33%. Okay, so these strains really, really are getting in the body, and we'll talk about what's going on and really helping us to manage those blood sugars. And like I said, we can all benefit from these things, even if it's not a problem right now. It's something that could down the road become something, and just really helping our body to support these processes that we need to be healthy is always a positive thing. Okay. So, what happens to the microbiome? If we're born with all of these strains, why on earth would we need to supplement these and get these back in our body? So, not only with type 2 diabetes, but all of us are going to experience differences in our microbiomes. And this could be to changes in our diet and our exercise. We're seeing all of the new marketing with all of these different fad diets or quick exercises that promise results very, very fast, and making sure that we're still supplementing with these things to get those strains that may have gone missing back into our body. So, besides just diet and exercise, this could be from stress, things that we can't always really control super well, emotional stress, stress with a new job, whatever it may be. Aging, of course, something we would love to be able to put a stop to, but simply going to happen to all of us. And with that comes changes in our microbiome environment as well. So as we move around different environments, we're exposed to different things. All of this can impact our microbiome and leave it in a place where it might need a little extra help to kind of reintroduce some of those beneficial bacteria. And especially too with people with type 2 diabetes, so they lack that certain beneficial bacteria that can metabolize fiber, which is a carbohydrate, into these useful nutrients, and then that short chain fatty acid called butyrate, which we'll talk about here in a moment. And so we need to get those back in there in order for our body to do these functions as they're supposed to and let everything run smoothly. Okay. So that brings me to, how does this work? What is going on in the body where we're able to see these impressive results? So what happens is when these 5 strains, when we take them in the capsule, they're in an acid-resistant capsule, okay? So it's imperative that these strains are going to make it to our large intestine. So we all have a home, we all like to be comfy cozy, and that is where these strains really, really do need to be to thrive, is in that large intestine. So, in order to get there, they've got to surpass the acidity of the stomach, they've got to get through the small intestine, and then finally they'll get to the large intestine where they really, really need to be to set up and make sure things are happening properly. Okay, so when they get there, of course, we've got that acid resistant capsule to help protect them through the acidity of that stomach. And also, we're going to really, really encourage you to take some sort of food when you're taking your glucose control. Okay, so that's just kind of an added layer of protection to make sure that these strains are getting where they need to be. And that's by having that food on your stomach neutralize the stomach so it's able to surpass this acid, that acidic environment. Okay, and so once they get to that large intestine, that's where they're going to set up their camp, set up their home. That's where they're most comfortable. Okay, and when they're there, they're going to feed on the fiber that we have in our diet. All right, so we don't want those strains going hangry. I think we've all been there a time or two. So we want to make sure that we give them the fuel that they need, we give them that fiber. So that is where the nutrition portion comes into the microbiome. That's how we can really best support these probiotics when we're taking them and make sure we're getting the most out of them. So when they feed on that fiber, they're going to produce a short chain fatty acid called butyrate. Okay, so that butyrate, a lot of talk has been going on about butyrate. So you may or may not be familiar, but it is a short chain fatty acid. So it's going to jumpstart a variety of different processes in our body that are really, really necessary for optimal health. And here It's going to jumpstart that GLP-1 process. Okay. And basically, what that does is it helps to manage our blood sugars by telling our pancreas to secrete less insulin and then our liver to slow down the release of that glucose. And that's what's really going to help manage those blood sugars. And that's where we saw that decrease in A1C over time, as well as postprandial glucose spikes. So with this in the territory comes, why can't I just take a butyrate supplement? We get that question all the time. If it's as simple as adding some butyrate in, or there was something that we didn't see in a stool test, why can't I just take a supplement? That's so much easier. So we don't know. Like I said, we really want to make sure that these strains get into the large intestine, and that's where everything happens. That's where the butyrate is produced. Those butyrate supplements, we don't even know if they make it past the stomach to even get to where they need to go. So there's no promise that these are getting where they need to be in order to work. So it's not as simple as just taking a butyrate supplement. Okay. So this is where the nutrition comes in. So this is my personal favorite. If you are a customer of mine, you know how I feel about fiber. You know how important it is. So just kind of spreading that knowledge here. These are some of the benefits of fiber. So they do come from our plant-based foods. So it's going to be in our things like fresh fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, things like that. And so they really do serve as a scrub brush for our gut. So when we eat these products, it's going to really stimulate and help our digestion to be nice and normal and regular. And with that, it's taking away some of those toxins in our body, in our digestion, and making sure it comes out in our stool. Okay. Another big thing with fiber, especially if weight loss is a goal of ours, is it helps us feel very, very full. It helps us with our satiety. So when we have a nice balanced meal and we have plenty of fiber in there, it's going to prevent us from going back for maybe those seconds, those thirds, and then a tasty treat or snack after dinner. So really, really helping us feel full to manage those cravings. And then it also is going to help lower our cholesterol. So if lipid panels or cholesterol levels are something that you've struggled with, improving their fiber intake or increasing that intake may improve those lipid values as well. So that fiber is going to bind to the cholesterol in your body, the free floating cholesterol, and then it's going to come out in your stool when you go to the restroom. And over time, therefore, leading to that decreased cholesterol level. Alrighty. And then it's also super important in terms of managing our blood sugar. So, as you know, fiber is a carbohydrate, but it's one that does not impact our blood sugar. So, when we have fiber, it's going to kind of blunt the response that our body would have when we're eating a carbohydrate heavy food. So, when we do combine it, say, some sort of nuts or fruit or something like that with our oatmeal, we're not going to see that same spike up in blood sugar that we would if it was just a plain, simple carbohydrate living by itself, but a more balanced approach that is going to help slow that digestion, and our blood sugar is not going to spike as much due to that. So we'll get more into label tips here in just a bit, but just to kind of give you a precursor, a really good source of fiber is going to be greater than 2.5 grams per serving. So if you're pretty used to food labels, you know to look under that total carbohydrates. And I have an example for you here in a bit where it says dietary fiber. And that's where you're going to see that number. I think when we give these recommendations and we tell you to watch your fiber and things like that, it can be really tricky. It's how do I know how much fiber is in things? So that's where those labels are going to come in big handy. And then also an excellent source is going to be greater than 5. So kind of keeping that in mind, especially if we're not big eaters and we're not getting a whole lot of food throughout the day, it's really, really important to optimize that and have those nutrient dense foods that are going to have a whole lot of fiber per serving. All righty. So here kind of goes into the 3 different types of fiber. So I love this slide. It makes it nice and simple to really understand. There are 3 different types, and only 2 of which actually do feed the microbiome. So all are super, super important in overall digestive health. Especially if we lean on the more constipated side, then we're going to look to this far left column, the insoluble fiber. So that's really going to stimulate our gut and make sure things are moving through properly, we're going regularly, things like that. You will see, though, only the resistant starch and the soluble fiber are going to feed that gut microbiome and really give those bugs in our body what they need to thrive. So, of course, they are all important. And you also will notice that you are going to get often a variety. So, they often overlap in the sources they're in. And so, when you have one source, you're probably getting a little bit of the insoluble fiber when you're getting the soluble, and vice versa. Um, in terms of feeding the microbiome, resistant starch and soluble fiber, of course. So we do want to encourage whole foods first when it comes to fiber. But if we do find that we're just not getting up to that goal that I'm about to give you here in a minute, then that is an option to go ahead and do some sort of supplementation. I do want to highlight, though, if we are doing that, you want to look out for soluble fiber. That's what's really going to feed that microbiome, make it happy and healthy, and give it everything it needs. And so, in terms of resistant starch, I think there's the most misconceptions around this one. So, not only is it in your green bananas, but it's also going to be in our carbohydrate foods like rice and potatoes. But the magic is here is when you cook the rice or the potatoes ahead of time, we want to have you go ahead and let those cool in the refrigerator. So let them cool overnight. It's not as simple as just leaving out on the counter for 10 minutes, but truly letting it cool. And that's going to change that whole molecular file of those foods, increase the fiber content by creating that resistant starch. And that is really, really going to be a great source of nutrition for our microbiome as well. And not only is it going to feed that, but because that fiber content is increased, it's not going to have that same impact on our blood sugars that it would have if we just had the potato hot or we just had the rice. And when you do let these cool, you actually can reheat them. So if potato salad's not your thing or cold rice isn't, then you can go ahead and reheat those and still see benefits. So it's very interesting if you do check your blood sugars regularly, or maybe you wear a continuous glucose monitor. You can kind of do these tests on yourself as well and have those foods fresh, and then go ahead and try the cooking and cooling method and see how that changes. But yes, go ahead. If you have any questions on any of these different types of fiber, pop it in the chat and I would love to address those. Okay, finally, how much fiber should we have a day? We've talked so much about it. How much do I really need? So there are a lot of different recommendations out there, but the most all-encompassing or most specific is from the National Institute of Medicine. So this takes into account both your gender and your age, as opposed to just one umbrella amount of fiber you need daily. So if you see here, find which category you may be in, separated by male and female, and then younger than 50 and greater than 50. So if you're a male greater than 50, you're looking at as high as 38 grams per day as tolerated. And then if you're a female below 50, you're looking at, or above 50, you're looking at around 21 grams. So between that 21 and 38 grams is probably where you're going to fall on recommendations of fiber intake. And this is daily. So we'll see here next where we can see these numbers on the food label. You can also use different applications. And then too, if you haven't already had an initial call, when you do purchase a subscription Pendulum product, you do get a free one-on-one 45-minute nutrition coaching call. And this is something we'll talk about. Everyone's needs are super different. Like I said, these are generalized. Of course, they're in categories, but everybody's needs are going to be different. So it's something that one of the Pendulum dietitians would love to chat with you about in an initial call to really see what's going to be specific to you. Okay. So some easy ways to add fiber here. Simple ways, handful of nuts. These are all going to range, but nuts are really, really great high source of fiber. Same thing, it's going to, when paired with carbohydrates, it's really going to help blunt the response. So maybe adding it to your oatmeal, sprinkling some, you can even blend them up into smoothies or have them on the side. Raspberries are one of our fruits that are super, super high in fiber, with a cup being 8 grams. So if you're a 50 or older female and you have a cup of raspberries, you're almost to your halfway to your daily limit or recommendation, not even limit. And then split peas. I think this one's fun. A lot of customers are like, I don't like split pea soup. What are some other ways that I can get it? You can use these split peas and you can make them into a hummus. You can do split pea fritters and kind of make it into like a little pancake type consistency. Sneak them into salads, all kinds of things. So if you're having a busy travel day or you're just not able to make those fresh meals, go ahead and put a half a cup of split peas in maybe your salad, or make them into some sort of a hummus, and that's going to get you a lot of your recommendations daily. Okay, and then another option is chia seeds. So just 2 tablespoons of chia seeds is going to equal 10 grams of fiber. So another big bang for you. I personally love chia pudding. I think it's super fun. If you do dairy, you can do it with the milk. If you prefer non-dairy, you can do more of the almond or soy. I've even had customers try it with water. And you can kind of let it sit overnight, let those chia seeds soak up the liquid of your choice. Add different seasonings, things like that. You can add fun seasonings for extra polyphenols, and that's going to give you another big bang for your buck source, if you don't feel like adding it to your avocado toast or your smoothie or whatever it is. And then, of course, ground flax seeds is another high source that you can treat as chia seeds and just kind of sprinkle them on foods, add to smoothies, things like that. Okay. Here we are to the food label. Okay, so this is a frozen lasagna example. Perhaps not one of the most nutrient dense options, but it's got 4 grams of dietary fiber here. So, what we want to look at, these were all recently updated so that it's very, very clear, the calorie content, and trying to make it more clear with serving size. So, I think that's where a lot of us have some trouble. Is I know personally some family members may have thought that, oh, if I get this bag of chips, I'm only having 280 calories for the whole bag or this whole frozen lasagna. But no, we got to look at this serving size. So if that's the case, you can multiply all these numbers by 4. There's 4 servings per this container. So kind of bolding these terms to really make it obvious that just 1 cup is the serving size here, and then that provides 280 calories and then all these nutrients per serving. Okay, so when we're looking at this daily value, we see percentages, and a lot of times people will see those, and maybe if numbers are your thing and you like the science and the math, then you're like, okay, I've got half of my sodium, whatever it may be. But these are all based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So these percentages may not be specific to your dietary needs. And again, something one of our dietitians would love to chat with you about if you're curious about specific macronutrients, calorie needs, anything like that. But just know that these daily value percentage may not be specific to what you need in a day. And then in terms of dietary fiber, you're going to find that under the total carbohydrate section of the food label. So here, for instance, we've got 4 grams per this serving. And then, of course, you'll have calories here. So if you are a pen and paper kind of person, then you can absolutely create a food diary, and kind of jot down the things that you've had that day, tally up your fiber intake that way. Otherwise, we do have a lot of recommendations for different applications you can use. If you're more of a smartphone person, you like to type it all in, that's great too. My Fitness chronometer is a new one that I've had a lot of customers love, love, love. So lots of different options there. This is definitely not something that we would recommend long term. We don't want it to become addictive or anything like that. So if it does, steer clear. But just to use as a learning tool to kind of see where your baseline is, where you're beginning off, and then use that, to really see where you can go from there, where you can add things. And there's lots of information on the website, different handouts and things. But again, we would love to chat with you one on one to really provide specific recommendations to you, and see how it's going to fit in your lifestyle, because we want all of this to be sustainable and not something that we just do for a short time and then hop off the bandwagon. So any questions on the food labels, feel free to pop it in as well, um, or applications or anything like that. Okay, now let's get to the questions. Thank you guys for being patient through the presentation. I'm ready to go ahead and answer your questions. So let me go
Are
ahead.
you ready for me?
We're ready for you, Jen. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to start from the top. And everybody, please feel free to keep popping questions in as we go. I'm going to start from the top. So if you have any general questions about the microbiome, nutrition, or any of the Pendulum probiotics that we offer, please feel free to pop them in and I will keep scrolling. So the first one that I want to ask you, Chandler, is from Ken. So Ken's asked a few good questions in here, but this first one is there a reason for not having a, sorry, it popped. Is there a reason for not having a warning for the following conditions that are reported on the U.S. National Library of Medicine? Sorry, every time someone comments, it pops me back down. As having high acromancia. So schizophrenia, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, ALS, autism, IBS, and atherosclerosis. So I think his question is, why do we not have a warning label about acromancia and these conditions?
Absolutely. So great question, Ken. I think a lot of this comes down to is we always want to refer you back to your healthcare provider with any kinds of questions of, is this appropriate for me? Is this going to be right for me? So a lot of research has been out of wonderful things in terms of acromansia. We still have so much to learn about it. But with any concerns that you may have, I would definitely encourage you to kind of talk to your healthcare provider, think if it's right for you, have that conversation with them. And if you do choose, we're here to guide you throughout the way, but always want to kind of refer you back to them and make sure that this is going to be an appropriate product for you. Great question.
Yes. I would also like to add, if I may, Chandler,
Of course.
specifically with ALS. I work with a lot of ALS customers who have provided us with tons of research that acromancia actually is missing in people with ALS. So I think the research is still too new and it can be a little conflicting. So I think more research needs to be done in these areas. But yes, I completely 100% agree, Chandler. Definitely referring to your healthcare provider. And then let's see. Daniel asks, can you take any additional types of probiotics with Pendulum?
Great question, Daniel. So a lot of our customers will ask us this, and yes, you can take other probiotics with our Pendulum products. The one thing we do like to warn though is when we do have this cocktail of different probiotics, it can be kind of hard to see what is working. So we want to make sure things are working for you. That's why we love to set those health goals to kind of relate back to and have those markers to see how is this working for us. So while you can take it with other products, we do just warn that if we're taking it with too many, it's going to be hard to see what's really working. So maybe kind of starting one at a time and kind of assessing that way. But it is safe to do so if that's what you choose. Just kind of a recommendation to make sure that we can really get down to what is specifically working for you and what is allowing you to see those health benefits. So great question.
Absolutely. And then Tamara asked a really good question. She says, I think in regards to fiber supplementation, how do you feel about inulin from chicory root or psyllium?
Great question. So, inulin is actually the prebiotic that is used in pendulum glucose control. So, if you're taking that product as well as the Acromancia, you're getting a little bit of that inulin in there. Psyllium is another one that I have a lot of customers really love to use to supplement. The one thing I will say, so of course, we do want to recommend whole foods first if possible. So, getting it from those fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, things like that. But if we do choose, I want to make sure we're looking for soluble fiber, which psyllium is. And so a lot of customers will do the powder form, and that will give you a little more bang for your buck in terms of using like a tablespoon. I think it's about 4 grams of fiber as opposed to those capsules. Sometimes in the little amounts of powder that's in those capsules, it takes quite a bit to get up to your fiber recommendation. So while you can use those to supplement, I would encourage you to try out maybe for a couple of days. Do the tracking and see if you're already getting those goals without the supplementation. But those are definitely options, and that inulin is a prebiotic that's actually used in our product to feed those strains.
Thank you. Gemma asked a really good question. She said, what are the best foods to eat alongside Acromancia for greatest benefits?
Oh, I love this question. Okay, so polyphenols are something we didn't talk about in our presentation today, but awesome question. So polyphenols are another plant-based food. They're an antioxidant that really increases the abundance of Acromancia in our body. So it's going to be in a lot of our different seasonings, as well as dark chocolate, which is so exciting, red wine, green tea, and there's lots of different resources out there too that will give you a variety of different, I mean, there's over like 8,000 polyphenols out there. So you might be surprised you're probably already eating a lot of the foods that contain it, but that's really, really going to increase the abundance of Acromancia in our body. So fiber is still going to be important to really support the gut bugs in our body, make sure our microbiome is nice and strong. But when dealing with Acromancia, it's the polyphenols that are really going to support that and increase the abundance. Great question.
We have so many great questions coming in here. I have one here from Nancy that asks, what's the difference between Acromancia and GI repair?
Awesome question, Nancy. So Acromancia is really, really encouraged when you're just looking to support your gut health, maybe increase diversity, things like that. The GI repair is more for occasional gut discomfort, bloating, gas, things like that. So they have a similar mechanism of action in that they're really targeted to improve our gut lining, while the Acromancia, it actually translates to affinity towards mucin. So it's going to eat off of our mucin layer. Jen and I like to think of it as like a skin exfoliator. That's one of my favorites. So when we exfoliate our skin, we get that dead layer off, and it's leaving that fresh, new, beautiful layer of skin that's nice and strong and making sure that nothing's passing into that bloodstream that shouldn't be there. So while the Acromancia is going to feed off of that mucin layer, the GI repair is actually going to produce its Clostridium butyricum, and it's going to produce butyrate. So different way of going about it. So we kind of chatted about butyrate in terms of blood sugar control today, but butyrate is also going to be important in really giving our gut cells or our colonocytes fuel and making sure that it's called the tight junctions in our intestinal lining, making sure that those are nice and strong. So same thing, we're not having things leak into the bloodstream that aren't supposed to be there. So another thing that we love to talk about on calls, because it really does come back to what your health goals are, what we think is going to be most appropriate for you. A lot of things go into that decision, but awesome question. I hope that kind of answers it. And there's also a post in our customer care teams popping things into, if they wouldn't mind popping in the 3 different products, which one's right for me. There's a blog post on our website that I love to refer customers to that allows you to take time with that information too, and really determine what you think the best fit would be for you.
That is a great point and kind of brings me kind of a good transition for Steve's question as well. So Steve asked, I'm interested in learning about which of your 3 products will best improve my gut health, looking to improve sugar cravings, recently quit alcohol, and stop binging on food, and improve his mental health.
Awesome question. He said which 3, right? Not just Acromancia or GI repair? Okay, so that's a great question. In terms of cravings, I've had a lot of anecdotal feedback from customers with glucose control especially, and I would say Acromancia as well, but the glucose control contains all 5 of those strains, and we've heard fabulous results of people saying that they just don't feel as hungry. I mean, they're eating their meals and they're satisfied for once. They're not going back for seconds and thirds and treats and snacks and things like that. So I would say that just from a customer standpoint of what I've heard, we've had fabulous results with the glucose control and really helping those cravings, not going towards the sweets as much by just kind of metabolizing our food as it should, and having those processes run as they should is really helping to kind of minimize those cravings.
Awesome. The next question is from Laura, and she asks, how would you recommend to take Acromancia? Early in the morning, with or without food? Sorry, guys. Every time I've got a good question. Every time someone
Yeah, good
comments,
question going.
or at night before going to bed, etc.
Awesome. So that is entirely up to you. The one thing that I really want to encourage and reiterate is that we do need to take these products with food. So out of all three of them, any one that you do choose, all of them are going to be needed to take with food. So the Acromancia is just one capsule a day. So if it's easiest for you to remember in the with your breakfast meal in the morning, you can even put a note near your coffee creamer or on the refrigerator. And if that's easier for you to just pop it with your breakfast meal, then that's great. We encourage that. The time of day is not as important as making sure we're taking it with some sort of meal. Now, if we're fasting or anything like that, we might need to take it with an evening meal or whenever we break that fast. So whatever just suits your lifestyle the best, as long as we're taking it with some sort of a meal.
Great. And then Deborah just popped in here saying that she heard Colleen say that she takes her Pendulum first thing in the morning before any food or drink, which is correct. She was on the Human Upgrade podcast. Thanks.
Great question, Deborah. So yes, we do want to encourage. So in our clinical trial, that's what we studied, was taking the glucose control with our meals. You can take it first thing in the morning before you eat, as long as you're going to have that meal right away. We would just want to really, really reiterate that it's super important that we have that added layer of protection to make sure that these strains are getting where they need to go. We want to make sure we're doing everything we can on our half to help those bacteria thrive and get in the right spot. So if that means breakfast is coming after, that is totally fine as well.
Awesome. And then Eileen says, I will be traveling. Can I bring the Pendulum probiotics with me even if I can't refrigerate it?
Awesome question. Do we know which product Eileen's taking?
We do not. So maybe if you want to address all three.
Okay, well, great question, Eileen. Pendulum glucose control does need to be stored in the refrigerator. We do have a lot of customers that still take this product and they do travel a lot. I take this product and I'm on the go all the time. So what we would recommend, if you do have an old bottle of Pendulum, you can go ahead and take just the amount of capsules that you need for your trip, your work trip, whatever it may be. Put it in that bottle and take them with you. So as long as you're keeping them in a bag, a carry-on or purse or something like that, and once you get to your final destination, if there is a fridge, go ahead and pop them in the fridge. We have done studies though that even up to 7 days of being out of the refrigerator, that our strains are still viable. So not something we necessarily want to encourage you to test, but if God forbid you need to have them out a little bit longer, that is going to be okay. Just kind of keep them in your carry-on, keep them in your bag, get them back to the fridge when you can. And of course, if you have an extra bottle, that's helpful to just take the amount that you need with you on the trip and then keep the rest in your refrigerator for your return home. In terms of Giardia and Acromancia, they're shelf stable, so you can go ahead and take those with you on the go. They do not need to be kept in the refrigerator.
Awesome. Thank you, Chandler. Okay, Steve has a really great two-part question. So I'm going to ask the first part first. He says, are your food plans customized per customer, or are they just off-the-shelf template food plans?
I love that. So if you're a dietitian, you've been asked more than probably 10 times to create a meal plan. So no, these are not individualized meal plans. So these were created by dietitians with microbiome nutrition in mind to provide guidelines. Some people really, really love to have something to really go off of, especially if cooking and preparing food may not be our thing. It provides some suggestions and ideas, but no, these are not individual to the person. So again, if we haven't had initial call and you're interested in signing up and getting on a subscription program with one of our products, then we would love to talk about that in a one-on-one call. That gives us 45 minutes of just you and your dietitian to really talk about your specific health goals, as well as any food allergies or intolerances, because we know every single person is so different and tolerates food so differently. So we would love to have that chance. The meal plans give some recommendations and some guidelines, but certainly not an individualized approach.
Awesome. And then the second part to his question is, what's the difference between your vegetarian and regular food plans? While I want to include more fiber in my diet, I'm fine with meat. Just want best gut health.
Of course. So if you are a vegetarian and you do avoid those meat products, I would encourage you to do that. That will give you the most freedom and options in a vegetarian one. If we do like meat and that's something we incorporate in our diet and we do tolerate it okay, and that's within our normal habits, then I would go ahead and encourage you to take a look at one of the other ones, because that's going to probably include some more of the foods that you might normally eat. But if you do follow a vegetarian diet guideline, then I would encourage you to go ahead and take a look at that one, because that'll probably be the most appropriate for your dietary patterns.
Perfect. Okay. James says red beef is my staple, so I think he might like
I
the
hear you,
microbiome
James.
meal plan instead of the vegetarian one. Okay. I'm going to skip down to the bottom here. So Karen, I think, reposted Shala's comment that I was getting to. So the question is Acromancia, is the Acromancia supplementation report benefits after discontinued use? Have you measured the quantity of Acromancia during and after, and how long do the strains stay in the gut? So it's kind of a three-part question, Chandler. The first one is, do we see benefits of Acromancia after discontinued use?
Great, Karen. I love you looking out for Shala too, making sure that gets answered. Great question. So this is another one that we do get often. So we studied pendulum glucose control, which does contain Acromancia in it. And we did a study where we had participants take the product and then they had what's called a washout period. So that's a period in which they discontinued use of the product. And that lasted for 4 weeks. Okay. And then we studied those participants' stool after that 4 weeks, and 80% of participants were missing at least one of those strains. So, with that knowledge, we do know after that 90 days or 3 months that discontinued use will likely result in these strains leaving our body, given the factors that we kind of discussed earlier. And that really does, unfortunately, tend to be the nature of probiotics in general. So, they're transient little creatures. Hopefully over time, maybe with more research and continued use, we would learn that these are strains that do kind of become colony forming and do really stick around. But with the knowledge we have and just the nature of probiotics really as they are, we do know that continued supplementation is important to continue to see those strains in there. Good question.
Perfect. And then the second part of that question is, have we measured the quantity of Acromancia during and after, and how long? Well, I guess you kind of addressed that part. But Karen and Shala, if you have any further questions about that, please pop them in here, because I'm going to kind of snowball into the next question that came up about this topic. And it says, sorry, when someone comments, it literally just crazy. Okay, Tanya says, if my bowel test came back with no detectable Acromancia and then I begin supplementing Acromancia, how long is it safe to take the supplement to get to normal levels?
Okay, so the stool testing for Acromancia really is not the best proxy. So I don't want anyone to get disappointed if maybe you've got a stool test back at baseline, you're missing that Acromancia, and that's how you found us. And that's fabulous that you're coming to really make sure that those strains get in our gut. However, like we discussed with that Acromancia very briefly, if you remember, that Acromancia is going to live in our large intestine, in the intestinal lining. So when we do that stool test, not only is, imagine your stool, one side of the stool might have completely different results from the other side of the stool, but also with it living in that intestinal layer, it may not show in your stool because that's not its home. That's not where we're really going to find it. So it'd be extremely invasive to find exactly how much, like an accurate count of Acromancia in your microbiome. So we don't want you to be discouraged with those stool testing if you're not seeing as increase of results as you may think or you may be hoping for, know that you likely still are getting the acromancia. When you're taking these products, you're putting it back in your body. Those stool tests are just not terribly indicative of how much, or accurately, how much acromancia is in our body.
Awesome. Thank you. And then the next question is from Gemma again. She says, if you hit 85 grams of fiber daily, are there negative effects in the long term from too much of a good thing?
Oh, I love that. That kind of comes back to moderation. So we give those recommendations, and of course, they are also not 100% individualized, something that you can, of course, work with a registered dietitian to determine what would be appropriate for you. So it really depends on how we're tolerating with certain gastrointestinal diseases, disorders, sensitivities, things like that. 80 grams of fiber might not be likely and might not be tolerated very well. We might have that gas, bloating, either diarrhea, things like that, especially if we're not having plenty of fluids as we increase up. So I would say just kind of listening to your body, see what you tolerate, work with a registered dietitian to determine how much really is appropriate for me. We do say in a lot of ways it is the more the merrier with fiber. However, when we get to those really, really high numbers, we're probably going to have some GI symptoms that aren't terribly pleasant and might be a little too much for our body to handle. So sticking around those guidelines, and then you want something a little more specific, then reaching out to a dietitian to talk about your health goals, what your history looks like, what you do tolerate, and they can provide a very, very specific recommendation that they think is appropriate for you.
Okay, so Daniel says, it's mentioned that the glucose control is temp sensitive. Just to be clear, does this also mean you should not take with a hot beverage such as tea or coffee?
Good question. So we don't have any data testing it with those hot beverages, but I would recommend, as long as you're taking it with that food, maybe just swallow with water, have it with your meals. We don't have any data that the hot beverage would change anything. However, I would just encourage you, take it with your water, take it with your meal, and then you can kind of have those things. Another thing with coffee too, if we are having coffee with that breakfast meal, making sure we're taking the product as we're eating, as opposed to just washing it down with some coffee. I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that, Jen.
No, I would agree with you. I think we didn't specifically test it with hot coffee or hot tea. And I feel like we've been asked like tons of questions, and I've never been asked this one before. So
I know.
Thanks for stumping us. But I would say that taking it with food is the most important. I don't think that the effect of the hot coffee or the hot tea would have
make or break.
A make or break, but just to be sure, I would just make sure you're taking it with food, as you mentioned. Okay, so Letitia says that she feels that the Parkinson's and other disease questions were skirted earlier. So I apologize for that, Letitia. She said, please address the high levels of acromancia in such patients. Chandler, if you want to start it, and I'm happy to help with that one.
Absolutely. So I know it's never the answer that anyone wants to hear, but there is so much more research that does need to be done on that. We especially have not done research with those specific disease states. However, as Jen mentioned, a lot of times these people may be lacking acromancia and actually is beneficial. But of course, you're always going to see kind of two sides to that, and seeing negative impacts that may be possible as well. We don't have a recommended requirement or what a super appropriate level is per person, nothing like that. But just working with your health provider and reading the information and working with a dietitian or whoever it may be to determine if these kind of go along with your health goals, if this is appropriate for you. But any concerns you have with this, we want to encourage you to take back to any healthcare provider to make sure that this is something that you think may be appropriate for you. And Jen, if there's anything you want to add, that's a really great question.
Yeah, no, it is. It's and you answered it beautifully, Chandler. I do think discussing this further with your healthcare provider is going to be always a go-to, but kind of echoing what you said about the research, there's so much research out there. The microbiome is such a new and emerging field, and I think we're just scratching the surface of all of the research that's available to us. Just kind of while we were sitting here, while Chandler was answering a question, I did a lit review search of Acromancia and Parkinson's disease, and you can find tons of information. And specifically with Parkinson's, there's one that I just found that was published last year that said that there's a potential that Acromancia can help with some of the inflammatory issues that are associated with Parkinson's disease. So I think it really depends. I think you're going to find conflicting research no matter what you're searching for. So that's where I'm going to encourage you, if Parkinson's disease is a concern for you, to take that up with your healthcare provider. And of course, let us know if you have any further questions about that. We're happy to dive into that further for you. So thank you for these questions. Okay, so where did it go? James asks, how much fat can you eat with Acromancia?
Good question, James. Oh my goodness. So Acromancia actually does not do well with a high fat diet. So there really are no specific recommendations for macronutrients because it is such an individualized approach. Sometimes people are getting around 20 to 30% of their total calories from fat, maybe even up to 30 or 40%. But we do know, and these were not in human studies, so this was in mice, that the high fat diet with Acromancia actually does have a negative impact. So keeping that in mind, and kind of goes back to, this is all new science, so lots more needs to be done in studies of Acromancia, but that is the research we currently have. So being wary of that, determining what an appropriate amount is for you, also in terms of overall health, heart health, and things like that. But knowing that high levels of fat does have a negative impact on Acromancia abundance in our gut.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Susan has asked a few questions, and one of them is Acromancia a good recommendation for a client with metabolic syndrome, classic beer belly, doing Gundry diet, etc.?
So that would be another one. I would refer you back to your healthcare provider to make sure it's something appropriate with any specific diagnosis. In terms of beer belly, if weight loss is one of your goals, we have had anecdotally as well, a lot of customers have come to me and told me about their awesome weight loss that they've achieved while taking the product, and higher amounts of Acromancia are associated with lean individuals. So there's a lot to delve into there and a lot more to learn. But certainly if we're concerned with any medical diagnosis, that's something that you would definitely want to check with your healthcare provider before taking, for sure.
Awesome. And then another good question, I can't find who asked it, but a question was, is there an age limit for taking Acromancia?
Wonderful.
Or like,
okay. Right. So we did not study the product in children or anything like that, but I do have a lot of customers who started out taking themselves, maybe middle-aged, and then did get their children involved in it and started on a product as well. It is generally recognized as safe as a whole. So kind of up to you on how you feel about that. We don't have data with children or supremely elderly or anything like that, but certainly has been done. We have a lot of customers that will start out taking it themselves and then pass on to their grandparents or their children, and are still seeing those positive impacts. So checking back in on that too. I don't know if anything else there, Jen, that I missed.
Nope, I think you got that one. I will say, somebody mentioned Colleen, hearing her on our podcast. So for those of you who don't know, Colleen is one of our is our CEO and co-founder, and I don't know what the exact age of her daughters, but I know that her daughters are definitely under the age of 18, and they both take it. So of course, referring back to your child's physician and their pediatrician so that they are aware of what they are taking is the number one recommendation. And then Gemma asked one of my favorite questions. Chandler, I think you're going to like this one. Can you outline the positive effects your customers are seeing from taking Acromancia?
Oh, absolutely. So like I said, one of the big ones that I don't know if I was just overly excited or surprised or what, but I've had so many customers who even within the first bottle, so the first couple of weeks of taking Acromancia, have told me about with weight loss goals of reaching, I mean, insane amounts of like healthy weight loss that's gradual over time. And they've seen the results quickly at first, and then, of course, kind of slowing down to be something that's way more sustainable. But that's a big one I've heard a lot about. We've also heard increased energy with Acromancia. Alongside with the glucose control, a lot of my customers on Acromancia will also report reduced food cravings and not having those strong sweet cravings, things like that. We've also had food sensitivities. So that's another big thing that we've been focusing on. So with that tracking fiber and things like that, if you're interested in doing pen and paper, you can even do it on the applications, keeping that food diary. And if there's certain foods that you're really having a hard time tolerating, or there's really no why as to why I'm not tolerating these foods or they're not going well. And a lot of our customers taking the Acromansia are able to gradually increase some of these foods that previously were not tolerated well by them. So lots and lots of very positive anecdotal feedback. And if you are a customer, we love to hear it. So please reach out to us and tell us your success stories, or even share it in the chat for other people to see. It really is so exciting. We're all learning so much together. So I love that question.
You do too. Okay. Julie has a two-part question, but I'm going to start with the first one. And she said, I left out my glucose control overnight. Is it still okay to take?
Yes. So, Joy, it will be okay to take. So, we did do studies on the glucose control that even up to 7 days of being out of the refrigerator, they were still viable strains. So, as soon as you remember, if it's still out, why don't you go right now and pop that back in the fridge, and you are going to be just fine. Those strains are still healthy and viable.
Great. And then Julie's second part was, I have been taking glucose control for 3 months. How does one get a nutritional consult? And Chandler, I just popped our email in the chat box too.
Perfect. Yes, go ahead and reach out to nutrition@pendulumlife.com. And we will get you scheduled. We would love to chat with you. I hate that we haven't already, so I can't wait to hear everything. And especially after today, you might have some questions on specific recommendations for you. So we're so excited to chat with you. Go ahead and reach out and we'll get you booked.
Awesome. We're excited to chat with you, Julie. Thank you for being here. Okay, John says, due to connection problems, I am late getting here. Well, we're happy you're here, John. I have severe diverticulosis. I think that's what he meant to say. Can this help with the digestive and bowel issues that I experience from time to time?
Yes. So it wasn't a product specification here either?
No product specification. John, if you want to pop in here which product that you're taking, and we could speak to it better.
Yes. A lot of our GI related like background customers are on our GI repair product for occasional bloating, gut upset, or GI upset, things like that is probably one of the most popular. But I've seen customers with all kinds of IBD, diverticulitis, diverticulosis, Crohn's, taking a variety of products, just kind of depending on their health goals. But I would say the most common would be the GI repair for something of that nature.
Yes. And I would like to add, we have not tested GI repair specifically with diverticulosis patients, but this is just anecdotal feedback that we've been receiving with improvements in their GI symptoms. Laura asks a good question. She says, are the nutritional consults with Pendulum free with purchase of the products?
Good question, Laura. So purchase of a subscription product, yes, you will get the opportunity to chat one-on-one for 45 minutes with one of the Pendulum dietitians. And then we have continued offers and group classes and things like that to look forward to after that. So it is free with a subscription product purchase.
Thank you. And we're almost at time, so I just want to answer 2 more questions here. The first one is from Mark. He says, to clarify, is the Acromancia shelf stable, and for how long?
Yes, so the Acromancia is shelf stable. Once you open that container, it's about 6 months that it's still going to be okay to have, but it is okay to keep it on the table, keep it in the pantry, whatever. You can keep it in the refrigerator if you'd like, but it is shelf stable. It will be okay at room temp.
And then, I think Pendulum customer care team just asked
Susan.
a
Okay,
question. But you might want to just shout it out to the crowd in case no one can see the chat. Susan asked if this will be recorded and that she would love to listen again.
Yes, Susan. So they helped us out there. It is being recorded, and so you're going to get that right after the AMA. So you can go ahead and listen back whenever, share it out. It will also be on our website too for you to refer back to. And we're so, so happy that you're here and love that you're listening and want to listen again.
Yes, well, amazing job, Chandler. We are at time, so thank you all for your questions and for being so engaged and for tuning in. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact us. You can contact us, the nutrition team, directly at nutrition@pendulumlife.com. But if you have any customer care related questions, you can reach out to our customer care team at hello@pendulumlife.com.
Yes, thank you so much for joining, everyone. It was so wonderful to hear your wonderful questions, and please, please do not be a stranger. Don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.